The sun burned like fire in the red sky as hot winds moved across the endless desert sand, and not a single sound was heard except the dry air scratching the ground and the metal groaning under heat. In the middle of this dead land, a human lay. Tied to a broken post, his arms pulled back with tight iron chains, his face half covered in dirt and sweat and blood. His name was Jack, but he could not remember anything. Clearly his mind was full of smoke and noise and pain. His head throbbed as he tried to open his eyes. The light was too strong, and everything around him looked strange and broken. Pieces of a small spaceship lay around him, black and twisted, as if they had fallen from the sky and burned on the way down. A strange fire moved across the wreck like blue oil dancing in the heat, but it made no smoke and no sound. Jack tried to move, but his body screamed with pain, and the chains cut into his skin every time he pulled. He looked at his hands and saw that his suit was torn and burned, his gloves gone, and his fingers swollen. His throat was dry like stone, and when he tried to speak, only a whisper came out. He remembered only one thing before the crash, a voice cold and sharp that said, "He is not one of us, leave him here. Let the desert finish him." Then silence, then darkness, then pain. Now he was alone in this alien desert, or maybe not. From the corner of his eye he saw a shape flying in the sky, a long shadow that moved fast and low like a bird with no wings. It circled once, then disappeared behind a hill of black rock. Then another shadow followed, and another. Jack's heart began to race. Something was out there, and it was watching him. He heard a sound far away like thunder, but it was slow and deep, and it made the ground shake a little. He looked around and saw dust rising in the distance, as if something big was coming, something heavy. His breathing became fast, and he pulled again at the chains, trying to free himself, but they were too strong. He looked at the metal post and saw alien symbols scratched into the side symbols that glowed faintly under the sunlight. They looked like warnings, or maybe spells. He was not just tied, he was marked. The sun climbed higher and the heat became worse. His lips cracked and his vision blurred. He began to hear voices whispering in the wind, strange voices that spoke no language he knew. Or maybe it was just the heat playing games with his mind. He closed his eyes and tried to stay awake, but sleep kept pulling him down. He fought it, but lost when he opened his eyes again. The sun was lower and the sky had changed color, now a soft orange like fire behind smoke, and someone was standing in front of him. Tall, thin, and not human. The figure had silver skin and glowing eyes and small horns on its head. Its body shimmered like water under moonlight, and it had a long cloak made of black feathers. The creature looked at Jack without blinking, and then knelt beside him. It touched the chains and they unlocked. With a click, fell forward, gasping for air, and pain shot through his shoulders and back. The creature said nothing but offered him a small bottle. Jack took it with shaking hands and drank. The water was cool and sweet, and it brought tears too. His eyes, he looked up and tried to speak, but the creature raised one hand and pointed to the sky. Jack followed the finger and saw something that made him freeze. Dragons, not one but three, flying in a slow circle above them, their wings wide and dark and full of fire, their eyes glowing like stars. The creature spoke at last. Its voice was soft and strange, like music mixed with thunder. "They are not beasts, they are protectors," it said. "You are not safe here, mechanic from Earth." Jack stared at it in shock. "How do you know me?" The creature said nothing more and turned away. Then it stopped and looked back. "Your kind left you here, but you are not alone now," it said. "Come with me if you wish to live." Jack stood up slowly, every bone in his body aching, but he followed. He had no choice. Behind him the chains lay broken on the hot sand, and the shadows in the sky grew closer. The desert became colder as night began to rise, and the sky turned dark purple with stars that blinked like tiny fires far away in the deep black above. And Jack followed the silver-skinned stranger across sharp rocks and dry, cracked ground, while the shadows of dragons moved quietly in the sky above. His body still hurt from the chains and the crash, and every step made his legs weaker. But he did not stop because he knew something dangerous had begun, and he could not survive alone. The stranger moved fast like a ghost. and said no words for a long time until they reached a narrow path hidden between two tall rocks shaped like teeth. The path led into a wide cave glowing with soft green light, and Jack stopped at the entrance, feeling heat rise from the walls, as if the stone itself was alive. Stranger turned and looked at him for a moment, then pulled back the black feathered cloak, revealing long arms covered in scales that shimmered blue and silver like moonlight on water. Jack took a step back, but the stranger raised a hand, not in threat, but in calm, and then it changed. The body twisted slowly, the face shifted, the horns vanished, and the eyes turned darker and softer. Now standing before Jack was a young man with dark hair and strange violet eyes, wearing armor that looked part bone and part glass. His voice came clear now, not like a whisper, but like a young prince who carried sorrow in every word. "My name is Kale. I am not like the others, and you were not supposed to survive." Jack stared at him, unsure if this was a trick or a dream or something worse. Kale walked deeper into the cave and pointed to a table full of broken tools and strange machines glowing with energy and symbols. "I saw you fix that water unit with just scrap metal and a piece of your own suit. That means you are the mechanic from the stars, the one who was sent before the gate closed." Jack sat slowly near the machines and tried to remember what Kale meant. Bits of memory returned quickly like flashes of light in a storm. He saw a white room back on Earth. He heard voices speaking of a secret project, a mission to connect with ancient alien worlds using a wormhole machine called the Spiral Gate. Then a woman's voice whispered in his mind, "He will fix what we could not if he survives the fire." Jack looked up at Kale and asked what happened to his ship and why someone tried to kill him. Kale sat across from him and touched a small crystal that floated in the air and showed a map full of swirling stars and red lines. "You were never meant to reach the capital. Your ship was redirected by traitors who serve my brother. He's the one who controls the hunters, and he believes you are a threat to his rule." Jack leaned closer and saw a marked point blinking on the map, deep in the mountain valley, far from the desert. Kale's eyes turned sharper. "That is where the core sleeps. It powers everything on this planet. The dragons, the cities, the sky, even the bond between my people and the flame spirits. But now it is fading." Jack felt the air shift as Kale stood and picked up a small orb from the table. Inside the orb, a tiny dragon moved like fire, made of wings and light. Kale said, "These are the last of our kind. They are not beasts. They are spirit-born protectors, and they are dying because the core is breaking." Jack looked at the orb and felt something pull inside him, not fear, but connection, like a signal call into the machines in his mind. He touched the table, and a nearby device blinked as if it knew him. Kale watched him closely. "You are not like the others from your world. Something in you is awake, something we lost long ago. Maybe the core will answer you." Suddenly a loud sound echoed from outside. The cave like metal crashing, and dust fell from the ceiling. Kale moved quickly to the entrance and looked out into the desert, his hand on a curved weapon at his belt. "The hunters are near. They ride the wind machines, and they do not stop. They smell blood and metal, and they follow orders from the throne." Jack grabbed a small tool from the table and stood beside Kale, even though his legs still shook and his head ached. Kale looked at him with something between trust and fear. "You saved me from death, mechanic of Earth. Now I will save you. But this path is no longer yours alone. We walk it together." Now Jack nodded and felt the same heat from earlier rise again, not from the cave walls, but from inside his chest, where something old and strange had started to wake. The dragons above screamed into the sky, and the stars blinked harder, and the wind carried the voice of machines. Jack knew the next night would not be quiet. The night air turned sharp as cold wind sliced across the open desert, and the stars above seemed to flicker faster, as if warning of something near and restless. Kale moved like a shadow between the rocks, his eyes glowing soft violet, while Jack followed close behind, carrying a small energy pack and a metal rod he had turned into a weapon using scraps from the cave. Far behind them came the sound of engines, low and angry, like wolves made of steel hunting in the dark. Kale stopped near A broken hill where the sand had formed strange curves and dips like waves frozen in time, and pointed to a tunnel below. The surface hidden by old dragon bones. They cannot fly in here, the signal breaks, and their machines lose power. We must move. Fast before they see the trail, Jack climbed down behind him, his body still sore from the crash and the chains, and his mind still full of questions with no answers. The tunnel smelled like ash, and metal and the walls glowed faintly with green lines. Pulsing like veins inside the stone, Cale pressed his hand against the wall, and a hidden door opened into a round chamber filled with glass panels, wires, and strange floating crystals. Jack stepped closer and touched one of the panels, and it lit up under his fingers, showing moving shapes and words in a language he did not know, but somehow understood. This was a control station before the war, Cale said. The old ones built it to speak with the dragons when their bond was still pure, but now only echoes remained. Jack felt a pulse from the machine, as if it knew he did not belong yet still accepted him. He turned and looked at Cale, who now stood silent near a large stone tablet covered in carvings of dragons flying over burning cities. Before Jack could ask anything, the ground shook and the ceiling cracked slightly, letting in a sliver of moonlight and sand. The hunters had arrived outside. 5 machines hovered low over the desert floor, their bodies thin and sharp with long legs and spinning blades on their backs. Each one carried a rider in black armor, with glowing red eyes and weapons that hissed with green fire. They spoke no words but moved in perfect silence, spreading across the sand like a net ready to close. One of them found the trail and raised a signal spike into the sky. A bright red light flashed 3 times and the others turned toward the rocks inside the chamber. Cale turned fast and pulled Jack into another tunnel, this one narrow and steep, leading down into darkness lit only by the soft green lines on the walls. They have seen us. We must move now or be trapped. Jack ran behind him, feeling the heat from above grow stronger as the hunters drew near. Suddenly Cale stopped and looked at a wide metal door sealed with a strange lock shaped like a dragon's eye. Only someone with fire in their blood can open this, he said. Only someone the core remembers. Jack stepped forward, not sure what to do, but the door began to glow the moment he touched it, and the lock turned slowly, then opened with a hiss. Cale stared at him with wide eyes. You are not just a mechanic. Your blood carries something ancient, something made for this place. They entered a chamber filled with half-built machines and broken parts, piles of wires and tools, and strange blue stones humming with soft light. Jack looked around and his hands moved fast, picking up pieces, connecting wires, recharging a small hoverboard, using only the tools nearby and part of the energy pack he carried. Cale watched in silence as Jack brought the old machine to life. The board rose slightly from the ground, spinning slowly and humming like a whisper in the air. We can ride this across the rocks fast and low. They cannot catch us. On foot, they jumped onto the board just as the tunnel behind them exploded and sand poured into the chamber in a thick wave. The hunters had fired a bomb into the rocks, breaking the path behind them, and the sound echoed through the stone like thunder in a cave. Jack pushed the board forward, and it moved fast, dodging fallen debris and sliding through tight turns with sparks flying from the side. Behind them came the hunters one by one, sliding down with claws digging into stone and eyes. Glowing red. Cale turned and fired a beam from his weapon, hitting the closest one in the chest, sending it crashing into the wall. But 3 more kept coming. Jack leaned forward and activated a small boost on the board. It jumped over a broken wall and landed hard on a lower tunnel. Cale almost fell, but Jack caught his arm. This way leads to the valley. If we reach the signal post, we can lose them in the cliffs. Tunnel opened wide, and the stars returned above them, and they flew out into the open air. Below lay a sharp drop and a narrow stone bridge. The board shook but held steady. One hunter fired a shot that scraped Jack's arm and burned through part of the board, but he kept moving. Cale raised his arm and threw a bright sphere into the air. It exploded in a flash of light, blinding the hunters behind them. The board shot across the bridge. and into the safety of the valley, while the hunters slowed confused and lost in the dust and smoke. Jack and Cale stopped near a high rock where old ruins stood silent and broken. Cale looked at Jack and smiled for the first time. "You are more than what they told us, mechanic from Earth, and I think the dragons already know it." The wind screamed across the high cliffs as the first light of day touched the broken stones and dark towers in the distance, and Jack stood at the edge with Cale beside him, both watching the sky as smoke rose from the eastern valley where the beacon node once stood quiet. Now it burned, flames danced along the old signal tower as black winged hunters circled above like vultures waiting for the last breath. Cale clenched his fists and his eyes burned with silent rage. "They moved faster than we thought. The Shadow Prince has seen your flame, and now he sends his beast before his blade." Jack looked at the hills below where small lights flickered inside ancient ruins and machines long buried were waking once more, their power drawn to the signal he had touched. The dragon spark in his chest pulsed softly like a second heartbeat, guiding him toward the obsidian tower. But something darker pulled from the west, where metal moved under sand and betrayal waited like a knife behind the curtain. Cale reached into his cloak and pulled a scale, no bigger than a coin, glowing red like fire held in glass. "Take this, it will answer if I fall and carry my fire to the eggs. If I do not return." Jack nodded and placed the scale into his belt where it felt warm, even through the cloth. Then the sound of engines broke the silence again, louder and sharper, as 4 hunter bikes burst from the canyon edge, riding the wind with silver blades and black armor. Jack stepped forward and lifted the device he had built from broken tech and firestone charged by the dragon spark and shaped into a launcher that hummed with power. Cale leapt into the air, his form shifting mid-jump, wings stretching from his back and armor forming like scales across his skin, and he flew into the sky like a shadow of flame. The hunters spread out, firing green bolts across the ridge, but Jack moved fast, sliding down the rocks and hitting the first with a blast from his launcher, sending sparks and metal flying. Cale crashed into the second, knocking it from the bike and spinning in the air with a roar that made even the machines pause. The third fired a chain that wrapped around Jack's leg, pulling him to the ground. But before he hit the rocks, the dragon spark flared and burned the chain away in a burst of heat. He stood again, eyes glowing, hands steady, and fired another blast at the final bike, causing it to explode in midair. The battle was short, but not without cost. Cale landed hard, his wing torn and blood dripping from his arm, and his voice heavy with warning. "They were only scouts. The true strike comes with the prince himself. We must not wait." Jack helped him stand, and together they moved into the canyon path where the old tunnels led toward the obsidian tower, hidden behind rock and sand and guarded by more than metal. As they walked, the path twisted and narrowed, and the air grew thick like smoke without fire. Jack began to feel pressure in his mind, a voice not loud but steady like a cold wind whispering doubt. "They left you. They used you. They will do it again." Cale noticed the change and spoke gently. "Tower speaks to those who carry light. It tries to dim your fire with lies, but your truth is stronger if you believe it." Jack nodded, but inside the voice still echoed. And with each step he saw flashes of earth, of suits and needles, of cold metal rooms, and a woman's face full of secrets. Then they reached the inner gate, a wide door made of dark stone and old bones, sealed by a symbol that pulsed with dark energy. Cale stepped forward to open it, but before he touched the seal he froze. From the shadows stepped a figure in golden armor with long silver hair and eyes like ice. It was Cale's brother, the Shadow Prince. He smiled without joy, and his voice cut like a blade. "Welcome, little brother, and welcome, fireburn thief from the stars. You bring me the last spark I need." Cale stepped back in shock. "You were supposed to be at the tower. Why are you here?" The prince laughed and raised a hand, and behind him stepped 5 warriors cloaked in shadow, carrying weapons shaped like dragon teeth. "Because you led me here, you fool." Jack looked at Cale, whose face had turned pale, and whose hand now trembled slightly. "No, it cannot be. You used the beacon. It was not a warning, it was a signal." Kale fell to his knees, his voice shaking. I only wanted to protect the eggs. I thought we could use him to power. The core again. I did not know you were watching. The Shadow Prince stepped closer, his eyes locked on Jack. And now the fire chooses a human over blood. That is why you must burn. He raised his blade and the warriors moved forward. Jack stood tall, the spark inside him burning brighter as the dragon scale on his belt began to glow and the machines behind him hummed to life. He spoke with calm. You should not have touched what belongs to the flame. Then fire rose and the ground shook in betrayal. Turn to battle asterisk. Fire spread across the canyon as the machines woke from their long sleep, and old bones under the stone began to glow with forgotten light, and Jack stood at the center with the dragon spark in his chest, burning brighter than ever. While Kale knelt behind him, wounded and full of silence, the Shadow Prince raised his blade again, his voice cold and smooth like poison. This ends here, mechanic. Your fire belongs to me, your power belongs to the throne, and this planet will kneel before the dark crown. But Jack did not move back. He reached for the scale on his belt and pressed it against his chest where the spark lived, and the light grew until the canyon itself seemed to breathe. The warriors charged forward with their dragon teeth blades cutting the wind. But Jack lifted both hands and the machines around him answered with a deep hum. Ancient towers lit with red and gold light, and beams shot into the sky, forming a circle above the battle like a cage of stars. Kale looked up and whispered with pain, "He's becoming one of us." Jack's eyes turned white and fire poured from his arms, not burning but shaping into symbols from the old language, the language of the core. The Shadow Prince stopped just before reaching him, and his face twisted with something close to fear. "What have you done? What are you becoming?" Jack did not answer. The ground cracked and a hole opened beneath them, and all were pulled into the depths below, into the heart of the planet. Where the core waited, they fell through light and memory, through old code and forgotten war, until they landed on smooth crystal floors inside a vast chamber where the ceiling moved like water and the walls sang with soft whispers. In the center rose the core, a floating sphere of light and shadow surrounded by rings that spun slowly, each one marked with fire symbols glowing in rhythm with Jack's heartbeat. The warriors stood slowly, but the core pulsed and sent out a wave that pushed them back, their weapons falling from their hands. Only the Shadow Prince remained standing, his armor cracked, his eyes wild. "This is mine. It was promised to me. The moment I broke the bond and silenced the flame, I took the voice. I took the power. I wore the crown of ash." He turned to Jack and pointed with a trembling hand. "You are not born of this world. You are an outsider. You have no right to speak to the core." But the core began to glow brighter, and the symbols on Jack's skin lifted like fire dancing across his arms and face. Kale crawled forward, his voice weak but clear. "The core does not choose by blood. It chooses by fire and will and sacrifice." Jack stepped toward the core and reached out his hand. Visions poured into his mind, dragons flying over oceans, cities made of crystal, wars that shattered moons, and then silence of betrayal, the silence of the Shadow Prince breaking the bond. Then a voice spoke, not loud but deep and endless. "Do you give your flame to restore the bond? Do you give your life to light the heart of this world again?" Jack looked back at Kale, whose eyes were full of hope and pain, then looked at the Shadow Prince, who now shook with rage. He nodded once. "I give everything." The core accepted. Light filled the chamber, and Jack rose into the air, fire swirling around him, not burning, not destroying, but rebuilding. The rings around the core spun faster and faster until they vanished, and the core shrank into a small, glowing sphere that floated into Jack's chest. He fell gently back to the ground and stood still for a moment, then opened his eyes. They burned with dragon fire. The Shadow Prince screamed and charged with his last breath, but Kale rose and caught him mid-strike, his sword meeting the dark blade and breaking it in two. The Shadow Prince fell, his crown shattering like glass, and his last words full of dust. "The fire should have been mine." Then silence returned. The chamber shook gently but not with collapse, with rebirth. Machines lit across the walls, and ancient maps appeared showing energy flowing once more into the old cities, into the dragon nests, into the flame burn. Eggs still waiting, Kale turned to Jack, who now looked both human and not, his voice steady and warm. "It is done, the core lives again." Jack nodded, but his hands trembled. "The signal to Earth was sent. They will come not with peace, but with chains. They will want what I carry." Kale stepped forward and placed the broken crown into Jack's hands. "Then let them come and find a world reborn. Let them face a king of fire, not a prisoner of steel." Above them the sky opened, and a single beam of light reached down through rock and crystal, as if the planet itself welcomed the fire home. The sun rose slow and golden over the cliffs of fire, and the air smelled like ash and morning rain, as if the planet itself had wept and now began to heal. Jack stood at the edge of the great mountain, his cloak moving with the wind, and his eyes locked on the sky where new stars blinked in a pattern he had never seen before. Beside him, Kale held a scroll wrapped in dragon silk, marked with the new seal of flame and truth, the symbol of unity between dragon and human. Below them, in the valley, flameburn dragons flew freely again, their wings spreading wide, their roars soft like thunder turned kind, and the old nests glowed once more with energy from the core now pulsing inside Jack's chest. Kale spoke first, his voice calm and proud. "You gave this world more than power. You gave it a future, and they will remember your name long after the stars forget ours." Jack did not answer for a moment as he watched the horizon, where a silver line marked the path of something falling. From the sky, a ship Earth had arrived. He turned slowly and looked at Kale. "They are early, and they will not come in peace. They will want the core, and they will not care who carries it." Kale nodded, his eyes full of knowing. "Then they must see who you are now, not what you were." The ship broke through the clouds, a black arrow with lights that blinked in cold rhythm, and weapons locked on every ridge. Jack walked toward the old beacon, now rebuilt with dragon tech and powered by the flame within him. He placed his hand on the side, and the entire valley lit up with golden light. A signal sent, a message clear: "This world is not yours to take." The ship hovered above the cliffs, scanning the ground and sending out metal drones that floated silently through the sky, their eyes red and empty. One drone came close to Jack, scanning his body and blinking fast as if confused. It spoke in a voice he remembered from long ago. "Subject Phoenix 01, status unknown, core signature detected, possible breach. Initiate recovery protocol." Jack stepped forward, his voice strong. "There's no breach. I carry the fire by choice, and no protocol can change that." The drone paused, then spoke again. "You are human. You belong to Earth. Surrender and return." Jack raised his hand, and from the sky, a flame-burned dragon landed beside him, its wings folding, its eyes locked on the drone with calm warning. "I belong to the flame now." With a single word, Jack sent the drone back toward the ship, and it obeyed, confused by something it could not understand. Inside the ship, voices argued, orders flew back and forth, but the fire signal blocked their command lines and disabled their weapons without harm. They could not take what was no longer theirs. On the ground, Kale stepped forward and raised the scroll high. "This is the truth, carved in fire and bound by choice. This world has chosen its guardian." Jack walked to the center of the valley, where the last flame-burn egg waited, glowing with soft light. He touched it, and it opened slowly, revealing a small dragon with silver scales and blue fire in its eyes. The creature looked at him, and then climbed onto his shoulder, curling around his neck like a whisper of wind. The bond complete, the circle closed from that moment. The dragons knew Jack as Flamekeeper. He was no longer mechanic, no longer soldier, no longer subject. He was legend. Stories spread across the planet, spoken in caves, sung in ruins, painted on walls. They spoke of a man who came from a broken ship, tied in chains, and left to die under two suns. A man who walked through death and shadow, who healed the core and lit the sky with fire. A man who faced kings and chose love over fear. And when the Earth ships left, when their machines failed to understand the language of flame, they vanished beyond the stars, carrying only silence. Jack stayed. He stood by Kale during The rebuilding of the city of dragons, a city not of war but of flame and flight and freedom. He trained new keepers, humans and dragons side by side. He watched the flame-burn eggs hatch and the old songs return, and in the quiet of night he often walked to the cliff where he first saw the core light rise. He would place his hand on the stone and listen to the hum beneath his feet, the living breath of a world that had accepted him, not because of blood, but because of fire. And one day when his eyes turned to the stars again and the wind called his name, he knew it was time. Kale gave him a blade shaped from dragon bone and wrapped in scale, a gift for the road ahead. The flameburn flew beside him as Jack stepped onto a new ship shaped by dragon wings and human hands. He looked back once and smiled, then rose into the sky, leaving behind not ashes but story asterisk.